Good evening, and welcome to Doctorpiece Theater. My name is Dr. Dennis Business. And tonight we will continue our dive into the Inferno by Dante Alighieri. Tonight, we will meet the Hypocrites and the Thieves. The poets are pursued by the fiends and escape them by sliding down the sloping bank of the next pit. They are now in the 6th Bolgia. Here the hypocrites, weighted down by great leaden robes, walk eternally round and round a narrow track. The robes are brilliantly gilded on the outside and are shaped like a monk's habit, for the hypocrite's outward appearance shines brightly and passes for holiness, but under that show lies the terrible weight of his deceit, which the soul must bear through all eternity. The poets talk to 2 jovial friars and come upon Caiaphas, the chief sinner of that place. Caiaphas was the high priest of the Jews who counseled the Pharisees to crucify Jesus in the name of public expedience. He is punished by being himself crucified to the floor of hell by 3 great stakes, and in such a position that every passing sinner must walk upon him. Thus, he must suffer upon his own body the weight of all the world's hypocrisy, as Christ suffered upon his body the pain of all the world's sins. The jovial friars tell Virgil how he may climb from the pit, and Virgil discovers that Malebouge lied to him about the bridges over the 6th Bolgia. Silent, apart, and unattended we went, as minor friars go when they walk abroad, one following the other. The incident recalled the fable of the mouse and the frog that Aesop tells, for, compared attentively point by point, pig is no closer to hog than one case is to the other. And as one thought springs from another, so the comparison gave birth to a new concern, at which I caught my breath in fear. This thought ran through my mind. These fiends, through us, have been made ridiculous, and have suffered insult and injury of a kind to make them smart. Unless we take good care, now rage is added to their natural spleen. They will hunt us down, as greyhounds hunt the hare. Already I felt my scalp grow tight with fear. I was staring back in terror as I said, "Master, unless we find some concealment here, and soon, I dread the rage of the fiends. Already they are yelping on our trail. I imagine them so vividly I can hear them now." And he, "Were I a pane of leaded glass, I could not summon your outward look more instantly into myself than I do your inner thought. Your fears were mixed already with my own, with the same suggestion in that same dark look, so that both form one resolution. The right bank may be sloping. In that case, we may find some way down to the next pit, and so escape from the imagined chase." He had not finished answering me. Thus, when not far off, their giant wings outspread, I saw the fiends come charging after us, seizing me instantly in his arms, my guide, like a mother wakened by a midnight noise to find a wall of flame at her bedside, who takes her child and runs, and even more concerned for him than for herself, does not pause even to throw a wrap about her. He raised me, turned, and down the rugged bank from the high summit, flung himself down supine onto the slope which walls the upper side of the next pit. Water that turns the great wheel of a land mill, never ran faster through the end of a sluice at the point nearest the paddles, as down that hill my guide and master bore me on his breast, as if I were not a companion, but a son, and the soles of his feet had hardly come to rest on the bed of depth below, when on the height we had just left, the fiends beat their great wings. But now they gave my guide no cause for fright, for the providence that gave them the fifth pit to govern as the ministers of its will takes from it their soul's power of leaving it. About us now in the depth of the pit, we found a painted people, weary and defeated. Slowly, in pain, they paced it round and round. All wore great cloaks, cut to as ample a size as those worn by the Benedictines of Cluny. The enormous hoods were drawn over their eyes. The outside is all dazzle, golden and flare. The inside? Lead. So heavy that Frederick's capes, compared to these, would seem as light as air. O weary mantle for eternity! We turned to the left again along their course, listening to their moans of misery. But they moved so slowly down that barren strip, tired by their burden, that our company was changed at every movement of the hip. And walking thus, I said, as we go on, may it please you to look around among these people, for any whose name or history may be known? As one who understood Tuscan cried to us there as we hurried past, I pray you check your speed. You who run so fast through the sick air, it may be I am the one who will fit your case. And at his words, my master turned and said, Wait now, then go with him at his own pace. I waited there and saw along that track two souls seemed to be in haste with me, but the narrow way and their burden held them back. When they had reached me down that narrow way, they stared at me in silence and amazement, and then turned to one another. I heard one say, This one seems, by the motion of his throat, to be alive. And if they are dead, how is it they are allowed to shed the leaden coat? And then to me, O Tuscan, come so far to the college of the sorry hypocrites, do not disdain to tell us who you are. And I was born and raised a Florentine on the green and lovely banks of Arno's waters. I go with the body that was always mine. But who are you? Who, sighing as you go, distill in floods of tears that drown your cheeks? What punishment is this that glitters so? These burnished robes are of thick lead, said one, and are hung on us like counterweights, so heavy that we, their weary fulcrums, creak and groan. Jovial friars and Bolognese were we. We were chosen jointly by your Florentines to keep the peace, an office usually held by a single man. Near the Gardingo, one may still see the sort of peace we kept. I was called Catalano, he Lodringo. I began, O friars, your evil, and then I saw a figure crucified upon the ground by 3 great stakes, and I fell still in awe. When he saw me there, he began to puff great sighs into his beard, convulsing all his body, and Friar Catalano, following my eyes, said to me, That one nailed across the road counseled the Pharisees that it was fitting one man be tortured for the public good. Naked he lies there, as you see, in the path of all who pass. There he must feel the weight of all through all eternity. His father-in-law and the others on the council, which was a seat of wrath to all the Jews, are similarly staked for the same evil. Then I saw Virgil marvel for a while over that soul, so ignominiously stretched on the cross in hell's eternal circle. Then, turning, he asked the friar, If your law permits, can you tell us if somewhere along the right there is some gap in the stone wall of the pit, through which we too may climb to the next brink without the need of summoning black angels and forcing them to raise us from this sink. He, nearer than you hope, there's a bridge that runs from every circle of the scarp and crosses every ditch from ridge to ridge, except that in this it is broken, but with care you can mount the ruins which lie along the slope and make a heap on the bottom. My guide stood there, motionless for a while with a dark look. At last he said, "He lied about this business. Who spears the sinners yonder with his hook?" And the friar, "Once at Bologna, I heard the wise discussing the devil's sins. Among them, I heard that he is a liar and the father of lies." When the sinner had finished speaking, I saw the face of my sweet master darken a bit with anger. He set off at a great stride from that place, and I turned from that weighted hypocrite to follow in the prints of his dear feet. The poets climb the right bank laboriously, cross the bridge of the 7th Bolgia, and descend the far bank to observe the thieves. They find the pit full of monstrous reptiles who curl themselves about the sinners like living coils of a rope, binding each sinner's hands behind his back and knotting themselves through the loins. Other reptiles dart about the place, and the poets see one of them fly through the air and pierce the jugular vein of one sinner, who immediately bursts into flames until only ashes remain. From the ashes, the sinner reforms painfully. These are Dante's first observations of the thieves and will be carried further in the next canto, but the first allegorical retribution is immediately apparent. Thievery is reptilian in its secrecy, therefore it is punished by reptiles. The hands of the thieves are the agents of their crimes, therefore they are bound forever. And as the thief destroys his fellow man by making their substance disappear, so is he painfully destroyed and made to disappear, not once, but over and over again. The sinner who has risen from his own ashes reluctantly identifies himself as Vanni Fucci. He tells his story, and to revenge himself for having been forced to reveal his identity, he utters a dark prophecy against Dante. In the turning season of the youthful year, when the sun is warming his rays beneath Aquarius, and the days and nights already begin to near their perfect balance, the hoarfrost copies then the image of his white sister on the ground, but the first sun wipes away the work of his pen. The peasants who lack fodder then arise and look about and see the fields all white and hear their lambs bleat. Then they smite their thighs, go back in the house, walk here and there, pacing, fretting, wondering what to do, then come outdoors again, and there, despair falls from them when they see how the earth's face has changed in so little time, and they take their staffs and drive their lambs to feed. So in that place, when I saw my guide and master's eyebrows lower, my spirits fell, and I was sorely vexed, and as quickly came the plaster to the sore. For when I had reached the ruined bridge, he stood and turned on me that sweet and open look with which he had greeted me in the dark wood. When he had paused and studied carefully the heap of stones, he seemed to reach some plan, for he turned and opened his arms and lifted me, like one who works and calculates ahead and is always ready for what happens next. So, raising me above that dismal bed to the top of one great slab of the fallen slate, he chose another, saying, "Climb here, but first test it to see if it will hold your weight." It was no climb for a lead-hung hypocrite, for scarcely we, he light and I assisted, could crawl handhold by handhold from the pit, and were it not that the bank along this side was lower than the one down which we had slid, I at least, I will not speak for my guide, I would have turned back. But as all of the vast rim of Malebouge leans towards the lowest well, so each succeeding valley and each berm is lower than the last. We climbed the face and arrived by great exertion to the point where the last rock had fallen from its place. My lungs were pumping as if they could not stop. I thought I could not go on, and I sat exhausted the instant I had clambered up to the top. "Up on your feet! This is no time to tire," my master cried. "The man who lies asleep will never wake in fame." And his desire and all his life drift past him like a dream, and the traces of his memory fade from time like smoke in air or ripples on a stream. Now, therefore, rise, control your breath, and call upon the soul that wins all battles, unless it sink in the gross body's fall. There is a longer ladder yet to climb. This much is not enough. If you understand me, show me that you mean to profit from your time." I rose and made my breath appear more steady than it really was, and I replied, "Lead on, as it pleases you to go. I am strong and ready." We picked our way up the cliff, a painful climb, for it was narrower, steeper, and more jagged than any we had crossed up to that time. I moved along, talking to hide my faintness, when a voice that seemed unable to form words rose from the depths of the next chasm's darkness. I do not know what it said, though by then the sage had led me to the top of the next arch, but the speaker seemed in a tremendous rage. I was bending over the berm, but living eyes could not plumb to the bottom of that dark. Therefore I said, "Master, let me advise that we cross over and climb down the wall, for just as I hear the voice without understanding, so I look down and can make out nothing at all." "I make no other answer than the act," the master said. "The only fit reply to a fit request is silence and the fact." So we moved down the bridge to the stone pier that shores up the end of the arch on the 8th bank. And there I saw the chasm's depths made dear. And there great coils of serpents met my sights, so hideous a mass that even now the memory makes my blood run cold with fright. Let Libya boast no longer. It never bred such a variety of vipers. No, not with all Ethiopia and all the lands that lie by the Red Sea. Amid that swarm, naked and without hope, people ran terrified, not even dreaming of a hole to hide in, or of heliotrope. Their hands were bound behind by coils of serpents, which thrust their heads and tails between the loins and bunched in front, a mass of knotted torments. One of the damned came racing round a boulder, and as he passed us, a great snake shot up and bit him where the neck joins the shoulder. No mortal pen, however fast it flash over the page, could write O or I as quickly as he flamed and fell in ash. And when he was dissolved into a heap upon the ground, the dust rose of itself and immediately resumed its former shape. Precisely so, philosophers declare, the phoenix dies, then is born again when it approaches its 500th year. It lives on tears of balsam and of incense, and in its life it eats no herbs or grain, and nard and precious mirth sweeten its cerements. And as a person fallen in a fit, possessed by a demon or some other seizure that fetters him without knowing it, struggles up to his feet and blinks his eyes, still stupefied by the great agony he has just passed. And looking around him, sight such was the sinner when at last he rose. O power of God, how dreadful is thy will, which in its vengeance rains such fearful blows. Then my guide asked him who he was, and he answered reluctantly, "Not long ago, I reigned into this gullet from Tuscany. I am Vanni Fucci, the beast, a mule among men, I chose the bestial life above the human. Savage Pistoia was my fitting den. And I, to my guide, detain him a bit longer and ask what crime it was that sent him here. I knew him as a man of blood and anger. The sinner, hearing me, seemed discomforted, but he turned and fixed his eyes upon my face with a look of dismal shame. At length he said, "That you have found me out among the strife and misery of this place grieves my heart more than did the day that cut me from my life. But I am forced to answer truthfully. I am put down so low because it was I who stole the treasure from the scarcity for which others were once blamed. But that you may find less to gloat about if you escape here, prick up your ears and listen to what I say. First, Pistoia is emptied of the black. Then, Florence changes her party and her laws. From Vlad Megara, the god of war brings back a fiery vapor wrapped in turbid air. Then, in a storm of a battle at Pinceno, the vapor breaks apart the mist, and there every wight shall feel his wounds anew. And I have told you this, so that it may grieve you." Vanny's rage mounts to the point where he hurls an ultimate obscenity at God, and the serpents immediately swarm over him, driving him off in great pain. The centaur, Cacus, his back covered with serpents and a fire-eating dragon, also gives chase to punish the wretch. Dante then meets 5 noble thieves of Florence and sees the further retribution visited upon the sinners. Some of the thieves appear first in human form, others as reptiles. All but one of them suffer a painful transformation before Dante's eyes. Agnello appears in human form and is merged with Cianfa, who appears as a 6-legged lizard. Buso appears as a man and changes form with Francesco, who appears first as a tiny reptile. Only Pusio remains unchanged, though we are made to understand that his turn will come. For endless and painful transformation is the final state of the thieves. In life, they took the substance of others, transforming it into their own. So in hell, their very bodies are constantly being taken from them, and they are left to steal back a human form from some other sinner. Thus, they waver constantly between man and reptile, and no sinner knows what to call his own. When he had finished, the thief, to his disgrace, raised his hands with both fists, making figs, and cried, "Here, God, I throw them in your face!" Thereat, the snakes became my friends, for one coiled itself about the wretch's neck, as if it were saying, "You shall not go on." And another tied his arms behind him again, knotting its head and tail between his loins so tight he could not move a finger in pain. "Pistoia, Pistoia, why have you not decreed to turn yourself to ashes and end your days, rather than spread the evil of your seed?" In all of hell's corrupt and sunken halls, I found no shade so arrogant towards God, not even him who fell from the Theban walls. Without another word, he fled, and there I saw a furious centaur race up, roaring, "Where is the insolent blasphemer? Where?" I do not think as many serpents swarm in all of Merima as he bore on his back, from the haunch to the first sign of our human form. Upon his shoulders, just behind his head, a snorting dragon, whose hot breath set fire to all it touched, lay with its wings outspread. My guide said, "That is Cacus. Time and again in the shadow of Mount Avatine, he made a lake of blood upon the Roman plain. He does not go with his kin by the blood-red fosse because of the cunning fraud with which he stole the cattle of Hercules. And thus it was his thieving stopped, for Hercules found his den and gave him perhaps 100 blows with his club, and of them he did not feel the first 10. Meanwhile, the centaur passed along his way, and 3 wraiths came. Neither my guide nor I knew why they were there until we heard them say, 'You there, who are you?' There our talk fell still, and we turned to stare at them. I did not know them, but by chance it happened, as it often will, one named another. 'Where is Seanfa?' he cried. 'Why has he fallen back?' I placed a finger across my lips as a signal to my guide. Reader, should you doubt what next I tell, it will be no wonder, for though I saw it happen, I can scarce believe it possible, even in hell. For suddenly, as I watched, I saw a lizard come darting forward on 6 great taloned feet and fasten itself to a sinner from crotch to gizzard. Its middle feet sank in the sweat and grime of the wretch's paunch. Its 4 feet clamped his arms, its teeth bit through both cheeks. At the same time, its hind feet fastened on the sinner's thighs. Its tail thrust through its legs and closed its coil over his loins. I saw it with my own eyes. No ivy ever grew about a tree as tightly as that monster wove itself, limb by limb, about the sinner's body. They fused together like hot wax, and their colors ran together until neither wretch nor monster appeared what he had been when he began. Just so, before the running edge of the heat on a burning page, a brown discoloration changes to black as the white dies from the sheet. The other 2 cried out as they looked on, "Alas, alas, Agnello, how you change! Already you are neither 2 nor 1. The 2 heads had already blurred and blended. Now 2 new semblances appeared and faded. One face where neither face began nor ended. From the 4 upper limbs of man and beast 2 arms were made. Then, members never seen grew from the thighs and legs, belly and breast. Their former likenesses mottled and sank to something that was both of them and neither. And so, transformed, it slowly left our bank. As lizards at high noon of a hot day dart out from hedge to hedge, from shade to shade, and flash like lightning when they cross the way, so towards the bowels of the other 2 shot a small monster. Livid, furious, and black as a peppercorn, its lunge bit through that part of one of them for which man receives his earliest nourishment. Then it fell back and lay sprawled out in front of the 2 thieves. Its victim stared at it but did not speak. Indeed, he stood there like a post and yawned as if in lack of sleep or a fever had left him weak. The reptile stared at him, he at the reptile. From the wound of one and from the other's mouth, 2 smokes poured out and mingled, dark and vile. Now let Lucian be still with his history of poor Sabellus and Nicetus, and wait to hear what next happened to me. Of Cadmus and Arthusa, be Ovid silent. I have no need to envy him those verses where he makes one a fountain and one a serpent, for he never transformed 2 beings face to face in such a way that both their natures yielded their elements each to each, as in this case. Responding sympathetically to each other, the reptile cleft its tail into a fork, and the wounded sinner drew his feet together. The sinner's legs and thighs began to join. They grew together so that soon no trace of juncture could be seen from toe to loin. Point by point, the reptile's cloven tail grew to the form of what the sinner lost, one skin began to soften, one to scale. The armpits swallowed the arms, and the short shank of the reptile's forefeet simultaneously lengthened by as much as the man's arms shrank. Its hind feet twisted round themselves and grew the member man conceals. Meanwhile, the wretch from his one member generated two. The smoke swelled up about them all the while. It tanned one skin and bleached the other. It stripped the hair from one man and grew it on the reptile. While one fell to his belly, the other rose without once shifting the locked evil eyes below, which they changed snouts as they changed pose. The face of the standing one drew up and in towards the temples, and from the excess matter that gathered there, ears grew from the smooth skin, while of the matter left below the eyes, the excess became a nose, at the same time forming the lips to an appropriate size. Here, the face of the prostrate felon slips, sharpens into a snout, and withdraws its ears as a snail pulls in its horns. Between its lips, the tongue, once formed for speech, thrusts out in a fork. The forked tongue of the other heals and draws into his mouth. The smoke has done its work. The soul that had become a beast went flitting and hissing over the stones, and after it, the other walked along talking and spitting. Then, turning his new shoulders, said to the one that still remained, "It is Busso's turn to go crawling along this road as I have done." Thus did the ballast of the seventh hold shift and reshift. And may the strangeness of it excuse my pen if the tale is strangely told. And though all of this confused me, they did not flee so cunningly, but what I was aware, that it was Pusio alone of the three that first appeared, who kept his old form still. The other was for whom you weep, Gavil.